Hi, welcome to the Essential Skills class for Literacy for Cleveland High School. Sorry that you have to listen to this PowerPoint and listen to my voice here, but because students will be coming in and out of the class throughout the year, this is the easiest way to communicate to you the information that you need for your essential skills. First of all, who am I? My name is John Golden. I am an English teacher here at Cleveland, and for the past 6 years, I've been working with students to ensure that they meet all of their essential skills. And who are you? You are someone who's been identified by your counselors and by the administration as needing one or more of your essential skills needed for graduation. You'll find out some systems and processes in a little bit to see if there might be an error or some kind of mistake. If there ever is, please just check with me and I can pull your records. Okay, so some of the graduation requirements for an Oregon diploma, some of these you may already know about, but you do have to have your 24 credits. You do have to have what we call a personalized learning plan, which you'll talk about more with your counselor. But essentially, this is your resume, this is your My Plan essay, and your Curlies. You also have to demonstrate the essential skills of these three components: reading, writing, and math. These three essential skills, one option is to receive passing scores on the Smarter Balanced assessment that you may have taken last year in your junior year. Another option are other scores: SAT, PSAT, other national exams. If you think that you have a passing score for those and it's not reflecting your record, please be sure to check with your counselor or with me. The third option are through work samples, which is what we'll be talking about today, because this class is all about option number 3, work samples. The most important thing that I can tell you about this class is that as soon as you demonstrate the essential skills that you need through the work samples, you're done. You are not staying in this class for 1 minute or day any longer than you need to. Now, for some of you, it may happen in a week, 2 weeks, a month, or maybe even a full semester or a year, depending upon your needs and depending upon your current skills. Some of you need reading and writing. Some of you need only one or the other. And some of you may have already have one passing writing work sample from another class, and I have access to those records. No one in here has any passing reading work samples, just because that's the way that we do it here at Cleveland. You will leave this class with all of your graduation requirements, except for earning your credits and personalized learning materials and math, if you need math. In this class, you will have the opportunity to take as many official reading work samples as you need in order to get 2 passing work samples. And you'll also have the opportunity to complete as many writing work samples as you need in order to get 2 passing writing work samples. We have to talk a little bit about the work sample conditions, because these are the conditions under which the class itself needs to operate. The most important thing is that everything that you do here has to be 100% completely your own work. There is very minimal or specific input from me or from other peers. But here's a really important piece of our understanding, is that all work samples can be revised as many times as you need in order to meet the standards that we'll talk about. You are not allowed to talk, use your phone, though you can listen to music while working on writing work samples only. These are state rules, not PPS standards. Some class rules, just so we can make sure that you get through what you have to do. Be here and be on time. There's no instruction really in this class-wide at all. There's individual instruction that I'll give you based upon your needs, but be here and be on time and get done and get through. It's important to understand that there are a lot of students in this building who need reading, writing, or both. So space in this room and in this area is valuable. So if you do have more than 3 consecutive unexcused absences or a significant number of tardies, we will withdraw you from the class, and then we'll just put the next person on the list into the class. You can wait until another spot opens up, or if you prefer, you can do these same work sample requirements at night school at Benson. You have to respect those work sample conditions that I just talked about, set by the state when we're working on those official work samples. Again, if it doesn't work for whatever other reason, we can wait till spring when maybe there are fewer students here in the class, or again, consider night school. You can absolutely take breaks as you need them. Again, there's not going to be any class-wide instruction, so whenever you feel like you need a break, go ahead and take a break. Just make sure it's one person at a time, and you do have to sign out and take the hall pass with you when you go. Just stay focused. when you stay focused, we can get the work done and you can be out of here. This is a time where you can pause this video here that you're watching, and if there are any questions that came up right now, go ahead and pause the video and then come up and ask me about them now. If not, I'm just going to go and continue on, and there'll be other places to pause as well. Okay, so first is the work samples that you need. I wrote on the inside of your table tent what work samples I have records of that you need, an R, W, or an M for reading, writing, or math. Again, if you do think it's an error, please see me. I'll check your transcript. I'll check your work sample history. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to go over first the basics of the writing work sample, since most of the people who are listening to this video need writing work samples. And then I'll go over the reading work samples, which doesn't apply to someone. If it doesn't apply to you, you can go ahead and just stop the video after the writing. For a writing work sample, you'll have up to 2 writing work samples of about 800 to 1,000 words, about 1 to 2 typed pages. One must be expository, which we call explaining, and then the other one can be persuasive or narrative. Those are different modes of writing. In order to pass a writing work sample, you need to have a 4 out of 6 in each of the following traits: ideas and content, organization, sentence fluency, and conventions. And I'll talk briefly about what each of those is in just a little bit. What I've noticed over the 6 years that I've been doing the writing work samples here at Cleveland is that successful writing work samples have examples and details to support the points you're making. When you're expressing a particular idea or a particular point of view, you need to have evidence that comes from your own experiences or from other research or other ideas in order to support the points that you're making. All successful writing work samples need to have an introduction, body paragraphs, 2 to 3 usually, and a conclusion paragraph. You do have to have what we call a variety of sentence types and structures, and your paper needs to be sort of easy enough to read aloud. If that becomes an area for you of concern, I'll show you some tricks on how to adjust your sentence types and structures in order to meet that. Your paper does have to be reasonably free from any grammar or spelling errors. You'll be able to type these, which means you'll be able to use a spell check. You'll be able to use a grammar check. You cannot have any capitalization errors of any kind, what we call run-on sentences, which I can explain to you as you need, or any misused pronouns. I'll say this now: you can and likely will revise these work samples, and that's perfectly fine. I said this before, but I'll just reinforce it here, is that all work must be 100% your own original work without assistance from anyone. And that means no one in this class, no one at home, no friends or family, not even from me. And you'll see the guidelines that I have that are in place for me to be able to help you to meet. All work can be must be completed on a Google Doc, and you can only work on it during this 5th period class period. If any edits are done at any other time, you will not receive credit, and you cannot copy and paste into this document. So if I ever see a revision that's happening outside of this class time, or if you've copy and pasted as one whole into this document, it won't count. So we'll have to begin with another work sample. And this is just the way for us to ensure that this is absolutely 100% your own work. For writing, you can use spell check, you can use dictionaries. I have print dictionaries here in the room, and any kind of grammar resources. And while you are writing, if it's beneficial to you, if it's easy for you, if it's helpful for you, you can listen to music. Just make sure that the music itself doesn't distract anyone else around you, and that it's not necessarily a distraction to you. You'll see a list of prompts that you have that you can choose from, and you can choose from any on that list. But here are 2 prompts, and I've put stars on them on the handout, that always work well. And they work well generally because they're very clear in terms of organization and structure. This first one says, "Parenthood is not easy. Explain some of your thoughts on what makes an effective parent." You can see why this one would be a pretty easy one to do. Just about everyone has had some kind of experience with parents, guardians that you can draw on, and it becomes a pretty clearly organized piece, which you'll see on the next slide here. Here's another prompt that works very well. Again, as seniors, you've had a lot of experience with high school. So this one reads, "High school is an opportunity to learn and grow. Explain to an 8th grade student lessons you've learned about making high school a successful and worthwhile experience. This is, again, a very clear, organized, and you can draw on a lot of your own experiences to support that particular sample. Your writing work samples do have to have these three parts, and I talked about this before: an introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion. An introduction, if this is something that you haven't worked on before in other classes, please come see me and I'll help you to understand a little bit more, but all introductions need to have what's called a hook. A hook is designed to grab the reader's attention and lead us comfortably into your topic, usually through some kind of context. It does have to have a thesis statement. A thesis statement for that previous one might read something like, "An effective parent is mean, selfish, and angry." Now, obviously, I put those three in there so as not to give you any kind of guidance in that, but you can see that the thesis statement clearly will identify what those three topics will be for your paper. You do have to have body paragraphs. Generally, that might mean three, might mean fewer, might mean more, but in general, 3 paragraphs tends to work pretty well. You do want to start with the topic sentence that reads something like, "An effective parent should also be selfish." You can see that it identifies what the topic is, and it also has a transition that comes from the previous sentence or previous paragraph. You need to make sure that you're including lots of examples. The examples themselves are going to be what's going to support and prove your point. When you finish with your body paragraphs, you will have a conclusion. A conclusion really is just designed to try to sum it up in some new words, maybe lead us into a new but related idea about this particular topic. That's the structure: introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion. If you follow this structure and if you include enough evidence in your piece, you absolutely will get 4s for ideas and content and organization. What I suggest is that you start by just brainstorming some ideas to support the prompt. Do you have enough evidence in there? Is this a topic that might work for you? Start sketching out maybe an outline for your topic sentences with maybe some bullet points as examples. And then just go ahead and begin drafting. Again, you'll be using the Google Docs to do it. Just make sure all of your work is completed there. Spend some time proofreading and revising. But when you're ready, then you'll share it with me to score. You can, and I'll just say, just from experience, you probably will need to revise. And again, that's perfectly okay to do. This would be a time where if you only need writing, and I'm just going to add one more little detail here, then you can pause, and if you only need writing and you don't need reading, you're done. You can go ahead and get started. You can go grab a Chromebook that's in the front of the room there, and if you haven't already reset your password, this is how you reset the password. You can see what it's already been reset to, and then you go to password.pps.net to change that password. And again, if you only need writing, you can go ahead and stop the video now, go get your Chromebook, ask me any questions that you have about the writing, and then begin. For those who also need reading, we'll continue. Here's some information just about what a reading work sample is, and it's probably just a little different, a little unusual, because you haven't done a reading work sample here if you've been at Cleveland before. But in order to demonstrate the essential skill of reading through work samples, you do have to receive a 4 or higher on each trait for 2 reading work samples, again completed under those test-like or work sample-like conditions we talked about. The requirements of a reading work sample. You'll read a text that's about 1,000 words at a high school reading level. You'll take notes in the margin as you read, and I have a handout that will describe that, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. You'll answer a minimum of 6 questions about what you read. And just like with the writing work samples, you can revise if you don't receive a passing score. So if, for whatever reason, one or more of these questions didn't meet the particular standard, then you can revise, and I can give you some general feedback on how to get that. If you take a look at the handout that's labeled Marking the Text, as you read, you really should do the following. Think about, if you're a visual learner, maybe draw some pictures to help you visualize what you're reading. Stick figures, little sketches, anything that can help draw some connections for you. Strongly suggest that at the bottom of each page of the text that you're reading, write just a brief summary. It just helps you monitor your understanding. It can be a sentence or 2 at the most, just to say, what I've read so far is this, this, and this. That'll be really helpful as you start answering the questions. A good way to mark the text is to draw some connections between you and the text. saying things like, oh, this reminds me of my cousin, or this reminds me of a time when I. Those kinds of connections allow for you to stay really closely engaged with what you're reading. You can definitely respond to what you read. I really like this part because, or I don't understand what this word means. Those are places where, again, you are inserting yourself and your feelings and your attitudes into what you're reading. And here's the most important part, is that these notes that you take as you read, not only can they help you and will help you as you're sort of monitoring your own reading and keeping track of what you're reading, I can actually score these as evidence of your understanding. So the marking of the text as you read, it is an essential component of the reading work sample. In fact, I won't score a reading work sample if it hasn't been marked. There's, on the back side of that handout with the marking the text, there are some suggestions that I have for how you go about answering the questions. As I said, there are 6 questions. The first 2 questions are what we call general understanding. Usually these are just summaries. A question like, if you were telling someone who hadn't read this article what it's about, what would you say? Generally, you want to try for about 3 to 4 sentences for that. For questions 3 through 6, you want to really bump that up a little bit. You really want to look between 4 and 5 or even 6 sentences. And they do follow a particular format. And this is the format that's described on the handout, but I want to emphasize it here, is that when you are answering a question, the first thing you want to do is that you want to put your answer. There might be a question like, what is the author's purpose in writing this article? Your answer might say something like, the purpose of this article is blah, 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 blah. The next thing you need to write, however, is some evidence from the text. And this means a direct quote that you have drawn right from the text itself. After you have the evidence, you have to explain that evidence. So you have to explain how that particular example or evidence proves what you said. So if you said that the author's purpose was blah, 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 here's your evidence for it. The next part you need to do is to explain how that evidence supports your own answer. And I strongly suggest that then you have another piece of evidence and another explanation of that. This format of evidence and explanation is essential to be able to get a passing score on these reading work samples. And I'll tell you that you cannot get higher than a 3. And remember, you have to have a 4. You can't get higher than a 3 without including quotations or paraphrase from the text. You have to have the evidence from the text to support your interpretations. This is what I've noticed. Again, 6 years of doing these reading work samples at Cleveland. Good notes equals good score, almost always. If you're really taking the time to really do the annotating, don't jump right to the questions, but really digging in and doing that marking of the text, it almost always pays off. Read carefully, summarize those main points as you read. Again, the bottom of each page, just go ahead and just write a quick, short little summary for yourself. You want to use a variety of different kinds of note-taking. Again, draw from that handout about the different types. For interpretation, I've said this once before and I'll say it a lot of times, always use examples to support. Always use direct quotations. The last 2 questions, questions 5 and 6 for a reading work sample, are always what we call analyzing the text. And this is where you really need to think about how the author created the text. What effect did the author intend to have on us as a reader? So for those last 2 questions, really think about yourself as a reader and what the effect of the choices that an author is making is having on you. I'm not going to lie to you, those last 2 questions are almost always the hardest and the trickiest to get. So they may be places that you might end up revising if you need to. Okay. In a second, again, you can stop the video because you're done with all of them, but if you have questions about the reading work samples, you'll definitely ask me about it. But we're all going to start with the exact same reading work sample. It's one called Graduation is the Goal. And in this particular article, it's about a program in Chicago that's helping students to graduate. You want to take notes as you read, and again, use evidence from the text in your answers. Unlike the writing work samples, you cannot listen to music, you also cannot use your phone, you cannot talk, and you cannot use a dictionary. You have to turn in your work at the end of every class period, even if you're not completed. If the work sample leaves this room, even by mistake, I have to go ahead and give you a different one. So that's it for all the information that I have about the reading and the writing work samples. Again, the goal for us is just to go ahead and get done, and then you can go ahead and have fifth period as a late arrival, if that's what you have in your schedule. So again, thanks so much for suffering through this long video, but again, please stop me if you have any questions or any kind of concerns.